My husband used my money to support his mistress for years, while our 28-year-old son lived in my house demanding I buy him a BMW. I left them all broke in one day. Before I walk you through the full story, I just have a small favor to ask. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and let me know in the comments. What city are you watching from? It's always amazing to see how far this audience is reaching. That Tuesday evening, when I walked through the front door after filming 3 cooking segments, I found Marcus sprawled across my living room couch with his laptop open and papers scattered everywhere. At 28 years old, my son still lived in my house, still slept until noon, and still had never held a real job for longer than 2 months. His girlfriend Ashley sat beside him, perfectly manicured nails tapping against her phone screen. She was 24, worked part-time at a boutique, and spent most of her energy curating an Instagram lifestyle that suggested she dated someone far more successful than my unemployed son. Marcus looked up from his laptop with that familiar expression of excitement mixed with entitlement that I had learned to dread over the years. He had been talking about starting his own business for the past 3 years, cycling through ideas like cryptocurrency trading, drop shipping, social media consulting, and app development. None of these ventures had progressed beyond the planning stage, but that never stopped him from presenting each new concept with the confidence of someone who had already conquered the business world. He turned the laptop screen toward me, revealing what looked like a professional presentation complete with charts, graphs, and projected revenue streams. The title slide read, TechFlow Solutions Revolutionizing Digital Marketing for Small Businesses. I recognized the template from one of those free business plan websites that promised to turn anyone into an entrepreneur with minimal effort. He began explaining his latest vision with the enthusiasm of someone who truly believed he had discovered an untapped gold mine. According to Marcus, he had identified a gap in the market where small businesses needed better digital marketing strategies, and he was perfectly positioned to fill that gap despite having no formal training, no client base, and no track record of success in any related field. Ashley nodded along supportively, occasionally adding comments about how brilliant his ideas were and how much potential she saw in his business acumen. She had a way of validating his fantasies that reminded me uncomfortably of my own mother-in-law, always ready to praise Marcus for his ambition while carefully avoiding any mention of actual results or accountability. But then Marcus reached the slide that made my stomach drop. It was labeled Initial Investment Requirements and contained a list that looked more like a luxury shopping catalog than a business budget. At the top of the list was a BMW X5 priced at $75,000, justified as essential for client meetings and professional image. Below that was high-end computer equipment totaling $5,000, followed by $50,000 in seed capital described as operating expenses and marketing budget. He explained that successful entrepreneurs needed to look the part, that potential clients would judge his credibility based on the car he drove and the equipment he used. Ashley reinforced this perspective by mentioning several influencers and young entrepreneurs she followed on social media, all of whom projected images of success through expensive possessions and lifestyle choices. I stood there listening to this presentation, calculating that my son was asking me to spend $130,000 on his latest business fantasy. This was more money than many people made in 2 years, and he was requesting it with the casual confidence of someone ordering coffee. When I pointed out that he had never successfully run a business before, Marcus became defensive. He argued that he had been educating himself through online courses and YouTube videos, that he had been networking with other entrepreneurs in various Facebook groups, and that this time was different because he had Ashley as his business partner and motivation to succeed. I agreed to purchase the computer equipment, recognizing that he would need professional tools, regardless of which direction his career eventually took. But when I told him I could not justify buying him a $75,000 vehicle, his expression shifted from excitement to disappointment to something approaching anger. Ashley immediately jumped in with stories about other mothers who had invested in their children's business ventures, painting a picture of supportive families who understood the importance of helping young people establish themselves in competitive Markets. She mentioned her friend's mother who had bought her daughter a Tesla to support her real estate career, and another family who had invested in their son's restaurant concept. Marcus added that he was already 28 years old, behind many of his peers who had established careers and their own homes. He argued that my reluctance to support his business plans was holding him back from reaching his potential and achieving the success that he deserved. That night, I lay in bed, thinking about the desperation in my son's voice and the way Ashley had looked at me like I was failing some fundamental test of motherhood. Part of me wondered if I was being too cautious, too focused on financial responsibility when I should have been nurturing his entrepreneurial spirit. But another part of me recognized something troubling in the way Marcus presented his business plan. There was no mention of market research, no discussion of competitors, no realistic timeline for profitability. It felt less like a genuine business strategy and more like an elaborate justification for expensive purchases that would make him feel successful without requiring the actual work of building something meaningful. The next morning, I woke up to find John already dressed for work, sitting at the kitchen table with Marcus and Ashley. They all looked up when I entered, and I immediately sensed that I had walked into the middle of a planned intervention. John set down his coffee cup and launched into what sounded like a rehearsed speech about supporting our son's ambitions. He argued that Marcus had shown real initiative by developing a comprehensive business plan, that entrepreneurs needed to invest in their image to attract clients, and that my hesitation was based on outdated thinking about how modern businesses operated. According to John, I was applying traditional employment standards to an entrepreneurial venture that required different strategies and approaches. He pointed out that many successful business owners had started with family investment, that the BMW was not just a car, but a marketing tool, and that my resistance was potentially sabotaging Marcus's future. Ashley reinforced John's arguments by sharing more examples of successful young entrepreneurs who had built their businesses with family support. She pulled up Instagram profiles of 20-something business owners who posed with luxury cars and expensive equipment, suggesting that this level of investment was standard practice for anyone serious about building a professional brand. Marcus sat quietly while his father and girlfriend made his case, occasionally nodding or adding supporting details. He had always been skilled at letting other people advocate for him while maintaining the appearance of humility and reasonableness. John's tone became more insistent as he argued that I was holding Marcus back with my fears and conservative approach to money. He suggested that my reluctance to invest in Marcus's business was partly responsible for his son's struggles to launch his career, that young people needed support and encouragement rather than skepticism and financial limitations. The conversation felt orchestrated, like they had planned out their arguments in advance and assigned different roles to each participant. John positioned himself as the reasonable father who understood business requirements. Ashley provided social proof through her carefully curated examples, and Marcus maintained the role of the misunderstood entrepreneur whose potential was being stifled by an unsupportive mother. When I tried to explain my concerns about the financial risk and Marcuse's lack of business experience, John dismissed my objections as emotional rather than logical. He argued that all business ventures involved risk, that Marcus would never gain experience without the opportunity to start his own company, and that my job as his mother was to provide the foundation for his success rather than create obstacles. Ashley added that her previous boyfriend's mother had been similarly reluctant to support his business dreams, and that family had missed the opportunity to be part of his eventual success when he found investors elsewhere. She painted a picture of regretful parents who had failed to recognize their son's potential and were later excluded from his achievements. The pressure in that kitchen was intense, with three people united in their conviction that I was being unreasonable and destructive. They made me feel like my concerns about money and responsibility were character flaws rather than legitimate considerations. John concluded the discussion by suggesting that we should take a family vote on Marcus's business proposal, presenting it as a democratic process while making it clear that I would be outvoted 3-1. He framed my opposition as selfishness, arguing that I was prioritizing my own financial security over my son's future happiness and success. After they left for their respective activities, I sat alone in my kitchen trying to process what had just happened. The unified front they had presented felt manipulative, designed to isolate me and make me doubt my own judgment about financial responsibility and family obligations. I realized that this was not really about Marcus's business plan or even about the BMW. This was about power dynamics within my own family, about who had the authority to make decisions about money that I had earned through years of building my cooking channel and restaurant consulting business. That evening, I was reviewing revenue reports from my latest sponsored content when Ashley made a comment that stopped me cold. She was scrolling through her phone, showing Marcus photos from what appeared to be an expensive dinner at one of the city's most exclusive restaurants. She mentioned casually that John and Jennifer had looked so happy together at this restaurant the previous weekend, that they seemed like such a perfect couple, and that it was sweet how John was finally with someone who appreciated his success and ambition. The room fell silent. Marcus looked uncomfortable but not surprised, suggesting that this information was not news to him. Ashley continued talking as if she had not just dropped a bomb about my husband's affair, describing the expensive wine they had ordered and how elegant Jennifer had looked in her designer dress. When I asked Marcus directly if he had known about his father's relationship with another woman, he became defensive. He argued that John worked hard and deserved to have some happiness in his life, that marriages were complicated and I should not expect him to take sides between his parents. Ashley supported Marcus's position by suggesting that successful men often had complex personal lives, that I should focus on my own happiness rather than trying to control John's choices, and that perhaps this situation was an opportunity for our family to evolve into a more modern and understanding arrangement. Marcus then showed me an expensive watch that John had given him, describing it as an early birthday present from his father and Jennifer. He seemed proud of the gift and grateful for their generosity, apparently unconcerned about the source of the money that had paid for it. The cruelty of this moment was breathtaking. My son was not only aware of his father's affair, but was actively benefiting from it through expensive gifts. Ashley had deliberately revealed this information in a way designed to hurt me while positioning herself and Marcus as allies of John and Jennifer. I felt like I was looking at strangers rather than my family. These people who lived in my house, ate food I paid for, and used utilities I covered were treating me like an obstacle to their happiness rather than the person who made their lifestyle possible. Marcus continued defending his father by arguing that John had been unhappy in our marriage for years, that I was too focused on work and money to be a good companion, and that Jennifer represented a fresh start for someone who deserved better than what he had been getting at home. Ashley reinforced these attacks by suggesting that I was too controlling and demanding, that men needed freedom and appreciation, and that my reaction to John's relationship proved that I was more concerned with ownership than love. When I told Marcus that I would not be purchasing the BMW, his response was swift and vicious. He said that he was finally understanding why his father had sought happiness elsewhere, that I was cold and selfish, and that no amount of money could compensate for my lack of emotional support and understanding. Ashley added that she felt sorry for both John and Marcus, who had to deal with my negativity and financial manipulation. She suggested that really successful families invested in each other's dreams rather than hoarding money and creating barriers to achievement. I went to my bedroom that night feeling completely isolated within my own home. The people I had supported and provided for were not just ungrateful, but actively hostile toward me. They had formed an alliance that positioned me as the villain in their story of pursuing happiness and success. But as I lay there processing what had happened, I began to feel something shift inside me. The shock and hurt were being replaced by clarity and determination. These people had revealed their true feelings about me and their expectations for my role in their lives. They saw me as a source of funding rather than a person deserving of respect and consideration. They expected me to finance their lifestyle choices while accepting their contempt and betrayal. They had mistaken my previous generosity for weakness and my love for obligation. Unable to sleep, I decided to conduct some research into exactly what had been happening in my own house while I was working to support everyone. I started with John's laptop, which he had left open on his desk in our home office. His browser history was a roadmap of deception and betrayal that went far deeper than I had imagined. There were searches for how to finance my son's business, second mortgage options, and using home equity for family investments. He had been researching ways to access my assets to fund Marcus's business dreams without my knowledge or consent. More disturbing were the searches related to his relationship with Jennifer. He had been looking into starting over at 50, introducing children to new stepmother, and blending families after divorce. These searches suggested that he was not just having an affair, but was actively planning a future that involved replacing me with Jennifer. I found saved emails from Jennifer that contained detailed discussions about their plans for the future. She was already referring to Marcus as our son and talking about the importance of supporting his business ventures as a way to build family unity. They had been discussing the possibility of Jennifer moving in after I was convinced to relocate for my career. The most shocking discovery was a series of messages between John and Marcus discussing strategies for getting me to agree to major financial expenditures. They had been coordinating their approaches, with John advising Marcus on the best timing and methods for requesting money. Marcus had told his father about his BMW request weeks before presenting it to me, and they had developed talking points about business requirements and professional image. John had suggested involving Ashley as additional support, knowing that her presence would create more pressure and make me less likely to refuse. I found evidence that Jennifer had been coaching Ashley on how to manipulate me. There were screenshots of their text conversations where Jennifer provided scripts for Ashley to use, suggestions for emotional manipulation tactics, and advice on presenting other families as examples of proper support. The conspiracy went even deeper than I had realized. John had been providing Jennifer with detailed information about my income, business deals, and financial assets. She knew exactly how much money I made from my cooking channel, how much I had saved, and what properties I owned. Ashley's Instagram account revealed that she had been posting photos taken inside my house, presenting my home and possessions as evidence of Marcus's success. She had been using my lifestyle to attract followers and create the impression that she was dating someone wealthy and accomplished. I discovered that John had already filled out preliminary paperwork for a second mortgage on my house. He had not submitted the application, but all the forms were completed and ready to file. He had been planning to access my home equity to fund Marcus's business without my knowledge or consent. The most devastating revelation was a conversation between John and his mother where he discussed his timeline for leaving me. He told her that he planned to stay married until Marcus's business was established and financially stable, ensuring that I would continue supporting our son even after John moved on with Jennifer. They had been treating me like a business asset rather than a family member, calculating how to extract maximum value from my resources while planning their exit strategy. My love and generosity had been seen as weaknesses to exploit rather than gifts to appreciate. I spent hours documenting everything I found, taking screenshots and copying files to a secure drive. The evidence painted a clear picture of coordinated financial abuse and emotional manipulation that had been going on for months or possibly years. By morning, I had a complete understanding of what I was dealing with. This was not just about Marcus wanting a BMW or John having an affair. This was about a systematic plan to drain my resources while positioning me as the obstacle to everyone's happiness and success. The next evening, John came home with a professional-looking folder and announced that he wanted to discuss Marcus's business plan in more detail. He had clearly spent time preparing for this conversation, treating it like a formal business presentation rather than a family discussion. He spread out financial projections and marketing materials that Marcus had prepared, along with research about successful entrepreneurs who had started their careers with family investment. The presentation looked impressive on the surface, with charts showing projected revenue growth and testimonials from successful business owners. John argued that Marcus's business concept had real potential, that the digital marketing industry was growing rapidly, and that young entrepreneurs with technology skills had significant advantages in the current market. He presented the BMW not as a luxury purchase, but as a necessary business tool that would help Marcus establish credibility with potential clients. According to John's analysis, the initial investment of $130,000 was actually quite modest compared to the potential returns. He showed me examples of other businesses that had started with similar amounts and eventually generated millions in revenue. Ashley had prepared supporting materials that showed the importance of professional image in the business world. She had collected articles about successful entrepreneurs who emphasized the role of appearance and status symbols in building client confidence and attracting business opportunities. The pressure they created was intense and sophisticated. They had anticipated my objections and prepared responses for each concern I might raise. When I mentioned Marcus's lack of experience, they pointed to his online education and networking activities. When I questioned the market demand for his services, they showed research about the growing digital marketing industry. John became more insistent as the evening progressed, arguing that I was being overly cautious and potentially sabotaging Marcus's future. He suggested that my reluctance to invest in our son's business was selfish and short-sighted, that I was prioritizing my own financial security over my family's success and happiness. He presented this investment as a test of my commitment to our family, suggesting that my support for Marcus's business would demonstrate my love and belief in his potential. The implication was clear. Refusing to provide the money would prove that I cared more about money than my own son's future. Ashley reinforced John's arguments by sharing stories about families who had missed opportunities to support their children's business ventures. She painted vivid pictures of regretful parents who had failed to recognize their children's potential and were later excluded from their success when they found support elsewhere. Marcus remained relatively quiet during this presentation, letting his father and girlfriend make his case while maintaining the appearance of humble gratitude. He occasionally added technical details about his business plan or expressed his appreciation for their support and advocacy. The evening felt like a trial where I was the defendant being asked to prove my innocence. They had positioned themselves as reasonable advocates for opportunity and success, while casting me as an obstacle motivated by fear and selfishness. When I told them I needed time to consider their proposal, John's demeanor shifted noticeably. He argued that successful business opportunities required quick decision-making, that delays could result in missing crucial timing, and that Marcus needed to know he had family support before moving forward with his plans. Ashley added that Marcus's competitors were already establishing themselves in the market, that his delay in launching his business was partly due to uncertainty about funding, and that my hesitation was creating additional stress and anxiety for everyone involved. I realized that this entire presentation was designed to manipulate me into making an immediate decision without proper consideration of the financial risk or long-term implications. They wanted to pressure me into agreeing before I had time to research their claims or consult with financial advisors. That night, I lay in bed thinking about the sophisticated nature of their manipulation. This was not just about Marcus wanting expensive things or John trying to justify his affair. This was about a coordinated effort to extract a significant amount of money from me while making me feel guilty for having any reservations about their plan. The following weekend, I discovered that Marcus and Ashley had moved into John's mother's house temporarily while they prepared for their business launch. Loretta had always been an enabler when it came to Marcus, treating him like a brilliant entrepreneur who was simply waiting for the right opportunity to demonstrate his potential. When I called to check on Marcus, Loretta immediately launched into a lecture about the importance of supporting ambitious young people. She argued that successful families invested in their children's dreams, that business ventures required initial capital to succeed, and that my hesitation was holding Marcus back from achieving his potential. According to Loretta, Marcus had been explaining his business concept to her, and she was impressed by his vision and preparation. She believed that he had identified a genuine market opportunity and that my refusal to provide funding was based on outdated ideas about financial responsibility. She suggested that I was being overly controlling and risk averse, that modern business required different approaches than traditional employment, and that my reluctance to support Marcus was damaging my relationship with my son and potentially sabotaging his future success. Ashley had clearly been working on Loretta, sharing stories about other families who had supported their children's business ventures and emphasizing the importance of maintaining family unity during challenging times. She positioned herself as Marcus's devoted partner who was trying to help him navigate family dynamics while pursuing his entrepreneurial goals. Loretta told me that Ashley was a wonderful influence on Marcus, that she brought out his ambitious side and encouraged him to think bigger about his potential. She described Ashley as mature and supportive, exactly the kind of partner that a successful man needed. The conversation revealed that Marcus had been presenting a very different version of our family dynamics to his grandmother. According to his narrative, I was the unsupportive mother who was more concerned with hoarding money than helping my son achieve his dreams. Loretta suggested that I should consider the long-term implications of my decision, that Marcus might choose to distance himself from family members who failed to support his business ventures, and that my relationship with my son was more important than any amount of money. She also mentioned that Jennifer had been spending time with them, helping Ashley understand the importance of family support and business investment. Jennifer had shared her own experiences about building successful relationships with supportive partners and the role that family backing played in business success. I realized that Jennifer and Ashley had formed an alliance designed to manipulate both Marcus and Loretta while positioning me as the obstacle to everyone's happiness and success. They were coordinating their strategies and reinforcing each other's messages about family responsibility and business investment. The coalition against me was broader and more organized than I had initially understood. It included not just John and Marcus, but also Ashley, Jennifer, and Loretta. They had all been working together to create pressure and isolation designed to force me into compliance with their financial demands. That evening, I received a text message from Marcus asking me to reconsider my position on his business funding. He wrote that he loved me and appreciated everything I had done for him, but that he needed to know whether I believed in his potential and was willing to support his dreams. The message was clearly crafted to manipulate my emotions while applying additional pressure. It positioned my financial support as a test of my love and belief in him, making it impossible for me to refuse without appearing to reject him personally. My investigation into Ashley's background revealed connections that explain the sophisticated nature of their manipulation tactics. Ashley and Jennifer had not met through Marcus and John, as I had assumed. They had been friends for over a year, long before Ashley started dating my son. Through social media forensics, I discovered that Ashley had targeted Marcus deliberately after learning about our family's financial situation from Jennifer. Jennifer had provided detailed information about my income, assets, and business success, helping Ashley identify Marcus as a potentially profitable relationship target. Their friendship was documented through months of photos, comments, and shared activities that predated Ashley's relationship with Marcus by nearly 6 months. They had been planning and coordinating their approach to our family, with Jennifer working on John while Ashley focused on Marcus. I found evidence that Ashley had been stealing my professional contacts and client information to build her own network. She had been photographing business documents left around my house and using my connections to promote herself as someone associated with successful food industry professionals. Jennifer had been using my family recipes in her catering business, passing off dishes that my grandmother had created as her own original creations. She had been profiting from my family's culinary heritage while simultaneously working to destroy my marriage and extract money from my household. The two women had been sharing strategies and information about how to manipulate John and Marcus effectively. Their text conversations revealed detailed discussions about psychological tactics, emotional triggers, and financial pressure points that would be most effective with each man. Ashley had been documenting my possessions and lifestyle for months, creating an inventory of valuable items and assets that could potentially be accessed through her relationship with Marcus. She had photographed jewelry, artwork, and electronics, apparently for future reference. Jennifer had been coaching Ashley on how to present business investment requests in ways that would be most appealing to me. She had provided insights into my personality, work habits, and decision making patterns based on information gathered from John over the course of their affair. Their coordination extended to timing and messaging. When one of them applied pressure about business investment, the other would reinforce those messages through different channels. They created the impression of multiple independent sources all reaching the same conclusions about the importance of supporting Marcus's business venture. I discovered that Ashley had been lying about her own background and financial situation. She was not working part-time at a boutique as she claimed, but was essentially unemployed and living off money provided by various men she dated. Marcus was not her first target, just her most recent one. Jennifer's lifestyle coaching business was largely fraudulent, consisting mainly of social media posts and a few small catering jobs using stolen recipes. She had been presenting herself as more successful and established than she actually was, using her relationship with John to create the impression of business success. The evidence revealed that both women were professional manipulators who specialized in targeting men from financially successful families. They had refined their techniques through previous relationships and were applying those skills systematically to extract maximum value from their current targets. My family had been infiltrated by two predators who saw us as resources to be exploited rather than people to build genuine relationships with. They had turned my husband and son into unwitting accomplices in their schemes while positioning me as the primary obstacle to their success. The pressure campaign intensified when Marcus returned home with an ultimatum. He announced that he had found potential investors for his business, but they required him to demonstrate family support through his own financial contribution to the venture. According to Marcus, these investors would match any amount that his family contributed, but they needed to see evidence of personal investment before they would commit their own money. John supported this narrative by sharing articles about successful business ventures that had started with family investment. Ashley reinforced their arguments by sharing stories about other young entrepreneurs who had secured investor funding after demonstrating family support. The story felt manufactured, designed to create artificial urgency and additional pressure. Marcus became increasingly aggressive in his demands, arguing that I was sabotaging his future and preventing him from achieving the success he deserved. John escalated the conflict by threatening to take legal action to access my assets for Marcus's business investment. Ashley added emotional manipulation by expressing her disappointment in my lack of support for the man she loved. She suggested that my behavior was driving a wedge between Marcus and his family. Marcus threatened to cut contact with me permanently if I did not agree to fund his business within 48 hours. John supported this ultimatum by arguing that families who did not support each other had no reason to stay together. I listened to their 48-hour ultimatum with complete clarity. These people had revealed exactly who they were and what they thought of me. They saw me as an obstacle to overcome rather than a person to respect. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. If they wanted to treat me like an enemy, I would show them what a real adversary looked like. Within hours of their ultimatum, I discovered that John had already submitted paperwork for a second mortgage on my house. He had forged my signature on preliminary documents and was attempting to access my home equity without my knowledge or consent. Marcus had also submitted applications for business loans using my property as collateral, claiming that I had agreed to co-sign for his business venture. Ashley had been spreading false information about my family's financial situation to her social media followers. The evidence of fraud was overwhelming and well documented. They had not just asked for money, but had attempted to steal it through illegal means. I contacted my attorney immediately and provided all the evidence I had gathered about their fraudulent activities. My attorney advised me to document everything carefully and avoid confrontation that might prompt them to destroy evidence. We developed a strategy that would give me maximum legal protection while ensuring they faced appropriate consequences. I also contacted my financial institutions to place fraud alerts on all my accounts and properties. The mortgage application was immediately flagged and rejected, preventing them from accessing my home equity through illegal means. That evening, I sat in my kitchen making a list of everything that needed to be done to protect myself and ensure that they faced appropriate consequences for their actions. For the first time in months, I felt completely clear about what needed to happen. They had given me 48 hours to comply with their demands. I decided to use that same time frame to dismantle their lives completely. The next morning, I filed for divorce with prejudice, presenting evidence of John's affair, financial fraud, and conspiracy to steal my assets. My attorney had prepared a comprehensive case that included bank records, communication logs, forged documents, and testimony from witnesses who had observed their coordinated manipulation tactics. The fraud charges against Marcus were filed simultaneously, with detailed evidence of his attempts to secure loans using my property without authorization. Ashley was also named in legal actions related to her role in spreading false information and assisting in fraudulent activities. John's attempt to appear in court as the reasonable husband seeking an equitable divorce was immediately undermined by the evidence of his criminal behavior. The judge reviewed the evidence with obvious shock and disgust, ruling that John's fraudulent activities disqualified him from any community property rights. Marcus faced immediate criminal charges that could result in several years in prison if convicted. Ashley was charged as an accomplice in the fraud scheme. The court also issued restraining orders, preventing any of them from accessing my property or contacting me directly. Within days, their entire world collapsed. John was suspended from his job pending investigation. Marcus was arrested and held on bail that none of them could afford. Ashley was evicted from her apartment when her lies about her financial situation were exposed. Within weeks of the court decisions, the complete extent of their financial dependence on my income became obvious. John was forced to move back into his mother's small apartment after losing his job and being unable to afford his own housing. Marcus lost his apartment and most of his possessions when he could no longer pay rent. Ashley disappeared completely once Marcus was arrested and could no longer provide her with money or gifts. Jennifer also distanced herself from John once his financial situation became clear. Both women had been attracted to what they thought were successful men with resources, not men facing criminal charges and unemployment. Loretta was forced to take responsibility for housing and supporting two adult men who had never learned to be financially independent. Within a month, both men were forced to find employment for the first time in years. John took a part-time position at a retail store, earning barely enough to cover his basic expenses. Marcus found work as a barista at a coffee shop. The criminal cases proceeded with predictable results. John pleaded guilty to fraud charges in exchange for a reduced sentence that included probation and restitution payments. Marcus also pleaded guilty and received a suspended sentence contingent on finding steady employment and making regular restitution payments. When he left that day, I felt cautiously hopeful that he might eventually develop into a functioning adult. The criminal charges and financial consequences had forced him to confront reality in a way that years of enabling had prevented. However, I also knew that real change would take years to demonstrate and that his current humility might disappear if his circumstances improved. I would maintain my boundaries and protective measures regardless of his apparent progress.